Here's a 15-second TikTok to let you know that if you like pink plants and you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars, get a Lady Valentine Chinese evergreen. They are so beautiful, they need water every 2 weeks, and they can live in low.
I had some plants that were starting to get top heavy, so I wanted to make a prop box. I'm using a plastic bin with sphagnum moss and perlite. I'm keeping it damp, not wet, and in a few months, all these plants will be fully rooted and good to go. Let me know if you have any questions.
Does your aloe vera plant look like this or like this? I think you might be loving it just a little too much. Now in my case, loved it not enough. This is how you help it. If you've had it outside and it's sun stressed, I'm sorry, but it's not gonna turn back to green. But you can bring it back into a shadier space and the new growth come back green. If it is rotted or you're having issues with the leaves, you'll see brown mushy leaves. You can pull off those dead leaves. Now I want to start fresh, so I want to start peeling off these not so great looking ones. When that soil is completely dry, when those leaves are squishy, then I know that it's time to give a nice and thorough soak.
This is another edition of Plant Parent Basic Basics. What kind of water should you water your plants with? Featuring my Monstera siltepecana because she's lovely. So if you're new to plants, you're probably thinking like, what I'm supposed to give them different kinds of water. And while it does not matter for all plants, some plants do react differently to different types of water. I'll start with tap water that comes out of your faucet. If you have city water, you have a lot of chemicals in it. If you have well water, it has a lot of heavy metals in it. If you have softened water, it has a lot of salts in it. All things that are not great for plants. Some plants that can cause like browning or yellowing leaves, and you'll get like buildup on the pot or in the soil, and you can see it come out in the leaves as well too. Full transparency, I have softened well water and I water most of my plants with it and they're fine, like they're clearly growing. For watering with tap water, it's going fine. Keep it up. This is the best option to me. It's inexpensive and it comes straight into your home. If you have plants that seem bothered by the tap water, like calatheas and ferns are notorious for this, the best water for them by far is rainwater. Pros are that rainwater is completely free, and the cons are that you're at the mercy of the weather and you need a system for collecting it. Bottled spring water is also good. It has trace minerals in it, but none of the other chemicals and stuff. Water also has the benefit of being void of contaminants, but it's also void of all those minerals that are helpful for your plant. So if you go that route, make sure you fertilize. So like a footnote here that some plants, like carnivorous plants, can only have distilled water or rainwater, so Google your plants. My plants that don't like the tap water, typically I collect rainwater, but a hack is if you run a dehumidifier in your home, like in your basement, you can use that water for your like sensitive plants. It doesn't have any of the heavy metals or anything in it, but it does have like all the bacteria that's in the air and the humidifier, so it is not distilled, but better than just your tap for your sensitive plants. As far as like filtered water from like a Brita pitcher or something, if you have a plant that's sensitive to tap water, I feel like it's going to have all the same problems with those filtered water. I use it as my drinking water, but I'm not entirely sure it removes all that much. I think that's just a thing that we do to make ourselves feel better. One last hack, if you have a freshwater fish tank, that aquarium water is excellent for your plants. It has all of the good stuff from fishies living in it and mild fertilizers. It's really good for propagations too. I feel like that was a lot, but I hope it helps, so let me know if you have questions.
Let me show you. A lot of my plants start off like this. All I need are bobby pins and obviously a plant that starts trailing. This one has been pinned quite a few times, so that's why it's so full now. All I do is find the node and very carefully arrange it and pin it back into the soil, and eventually it starts growing roots, and that's how I get my plants to be nice and full.
One reason why your plants keep dying on you. Even if you're saturating your plants, they could still be dry underneath the surface soil, especially ones that have been in the same pot for a long time. So before you water, make sure you dig up the surface soil and use a chopstick to dig some holes. This little trick has helped me make my plants absolutely thrive. I want you guys to test this out, so go ahead, stitch me. I want to see if your plants are dry underneath even after a really good water.
Hi plant friends, today we're doing some lazy air layering. What is air layering? It's basically pre-rooting your plant a little bit before giving it the chop. Usually you chop and you prop. This is like propping and then chopping. You can do it a lot of ways, but today my supplies are moss, a little piece of plastic, and some tape. Right here is my lovely assistant. This is where I plan on eventually chopping, and as you can see, we already have an aerial root forming here. If you have these small pots and don't have a use for them, you can also cut them in half and air layer inside of them. Basically, just save everything. I'm gonna start with some moss in here. It's probably plenty. Have a piece of tape ready and fold her down and wrap around, and I'm gonna tape it like that. Because it makes the plant a lot heavier, I'm gonna move this twist tie so it doesn't rub against this growth point and secure it around the moss. It's not exactly cute, but there's no moss sticking out the top or bottom. However, there is a small opening if I want to get in there with some water again. Hopefully she can be chopped in a couple weeks. This also makes the propagating process way less nerve-wracking when it comes to those plants that are hard to replace. You don't need fancy supplies, so try it out.
Let's answer some of the most commonly asked questions from my orchid video. These are air roots. They're good for your plants. I only cut them if they're dry, they're cracked, or they're rotted. But if not, and they're white or silvery like this, leave them alone. I only have leaves, my blooms are gone. If you continue caring for the leaves like you were before when there were blooms on it, eventually you get new blooms. I'm waiting for its new blooms to come out. I know ice cubes. Had luck with ice cubes, do your thing. These plants are tropical plants. Imagine that you are out in nature, it is hot outside, all of a sudden you go and submerge your body in ice cold water. It's gonna shock you, shock your system. It shocks the roots, don't shock your roots. What about repotting? An orchid or any plant, leave it alone unless there's issues. I eventually want to repot this. Repot it in is either just plain orchid bark or a combination of orchid bark and sphagnum moss. Hope this helps.
Let's propagate a snake plant. First things first, I'm going to sanitize my shears with hydrogen peroxide. Then I'm going to run off to my plant, pick the leaf I want to propagate from. I'm going to pick this big one. I'm going to identify the bottom and start making my cuttings. It's super important that you place the bottom of the leaf in the water. Otherwise, your roots will not grow. So I like to make these V cuttings to make sure that I know which is top and which is bottom. You only want to cover about 1/4 of the tissue with water. Otherwise, you will be risking rotting the leaf. And you got to be super patient because it can take up to 8 weeks for your roots to start growing.
How do I know if my plant needs water? First, I want to say that different plants have different watering needs. So you got to be sure to research and find out what your plant's watering needs are first. For example, your snake plants, your Hoyas, your succulents, they like to get dry before they get watered again, meaning bone dry in the soil. Your philodendrons and your pothos like to get about 75% dry before they like to get watered again. And then your prayer plants only like to get about 25 to 33% dry before they get watered again. Once you figure that out, the way that I like to tell if my plant needs water is by actually touching the soil. For sure you can get a moisture meter, but I like to kind of just get a sense with my hand. It also gives me a chance to get close with my plant and see if there's anything else I might be missing. So you take this magical tool, your finger, and you stick it in the soil. See, just stick it like that. It came out and there's almost no soil on my finger, which means that this plant needs water.
Adding rocks to the bottom of your pot doesn't work. Here's why. When we water plants, two things are happening. Gravity is taking the water down and capillary action is taking the water up. Where those 2 points meet is called the saturation zone. In the saturation zone, there is no oxygen. Lack of oxygen is actually what kills your plant roots. Capillary action is going to start where the soil ends. So in this case, in a pot full of soil at the very bottom, when we add rocks, this is about 1 inch of rocks, the capillary action is going to start, again, where the soil starts, so up higher. So by adding rocks, we naturally raise the saturation zone. And you can see our roots right here are actually in the saturation zone. And everything right here does not have oxygen, therefore potentially killing off these roots. At the end of the day, we still recommend to just have drainage with all of your pot. This is going to allow you to fully saturate all of the roots, get them all oxygenated, but all of that extra moisture is going to drain down. It makes plant care 100 times easier, and we never recommend potting your plants without drainage. But if you're going to do it, leave the rocks in the river.